May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of all our hearts be now and always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. The trouble with a really well-known story is precisely that we know it so well that we tend to take the details for granted, and we miss what is just below the surface. We remember the story outline, but we miss the significance of the detail. Our gospel reading this morning is a good example. The story of Zacchaeus. We all know it. It's a lovely, enticing word picture. It's colourful, it's very visual, we can easily imagine the scene. It captivates our imagination. And we can picture ourselves in imagination in a similar scene. A similar scene today. We're in a crowd outside the Vatican, and Pope Francis picks us out and says, "Let's have supper together." Or King Charles III, our new king, spots us on a royal walkabout and asks us to join him for dinner. What? Me? Of course. Yes, of course. I'll come. It's a story I can tell and retell to my family and friends. But to look at the story of Zacchaeus in this way is only a superficial reading, a celebrity encounter in first century Palestine. In fact, there's a lot more going on underneath, and the Zacchaeus story raises a number of interesting questions which we might be tempted to skate over just because the outline of the story is so familiar. To begin with, why did Zacchaeus climb the tree? Well, surely you say it's because the gospel tells us that he was a short man and couldn't see over the crowd. So he climbs the tree to get a better view. In fact, the Greek text could equally mean that it was Jesus who was a short man. It's not clear who the he is for he was a small man. It's ambiguous, but even if you do think it's Zacchaeus, who is small, then that's only one part of the answer. Remember that Zacchaeus is a tax collector on behalf of the occupying Roman forces. Indeed, he is the chief tax collector, hated by the Jews as a betrayer of his nation and a despicable thief. He made his money by grossly overcharging so that he could cream off a bit on the side. He fleeces people shamelessly. He's the enemy, the collaborator. For him, therefore, it's dangerous to mingle with the crowd. If they recognize him, he might get beaten up, or worse still, get a knife in his back. So to avoid this danger, he keeps well out of their way and climbs a tree to hide among the branches. Second question, why did he want to see Jesus in the first place? Well, the obvious answer is that he was curious. Jesus' reputation was circulating amongst the towns and villages of Galilee. He'd become a celebrity and a wonder worker. He was in Jericho, and Zacchaeus was anxious to see him. But I think it was more than that. Zacchaeus waited to see Jesus, yes, but also to try to see what Jesus was really like, to see, as we would say, where he's coming from. He wanted to get the measure of the man. Because of the hostile crowd, and because of when you build someone up, it's always possible when you meet them in the flesh that they don't live up to expectations. So because also of the possibility of disappointment, what if he turned out to be a man of straw? Was it really worth the risk to find out, the risk of possible attack. Well, thank goodness Zacchaeus made his decision to climb the tree, because looking down and listening to what he saw and heard profoundly affected him and changed his whole life. Third question, what happened next? Well, in spite of being hidden in the leaves of the tree, Jesus spots him. Zacchaeus has seen Jesus. Now Jesus sees Zacchaeus. He looks up, looks at him, and calls him by name. I wonder what Zacchaeus expected Jesus to say to him. Probably a stinging denunciation for all his corrupt misdeeds. But to his amazement, Jesus says, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Jesus invites himself to the house of the hated Zacchaeus to break bread together. Well, the crowd don't like this one bit. He's the collaborator, the enemy. How dare Jesus do this? As one commentator has said, for one friend Jesus made that day, he must have lost 100 when he chose Zacchaeus to be his host. Fourth question, what does the crowd do? Well, of course, they start to murmur. Clearly, there's trouble brewing. Their hero, Jesus, is going to eat at the house of a sinner, a traitor. But Jesus rebukes them and reminds them that Zacchaeus, too, is a son of Abraham. Son of Abraham, that most cherished of titles for a Jew to bear. What a wonderful sense of his own worth that title on Jesus' lips must have conveyed to Zacchaeus. He, the outsider, felt affirmed. Fifth question, what happens next? Zacchaeus offers to give half his wealth to the poor and to repay fourfold those he has cheated. An extravagant gesture which prompts Jesus to remind the crowd that he has come to seek out and to save those who are lost. And lost, in this context, doesn't mean damned, it means in the wrong place. Zacchaeus had most certainly been in the wrong place. But now he was in the right place beside Jesus. And so to the final question. What does this lovely story tell us? What does it have to say to us? Suppose for a moment that Zacchaeus, thinking about the arrival of Jesus in Jericho, wanting very much to see him, but frightened of what the crowd might do to him if he dared to show his face amongst them. What if Zacchaeus had decided after all to play it safe and to stay at home? No meeting, no encounter, no life-changing experience. He would have spent the rest of his life wondering what might have happened if he had only plucked up the courage to go and see. You may have heard of the 19th century American poet John Greenleaf Whittier. He's perhaps best known to us for the poem of his that became a hymn, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind. I think you're unlikely to have read his poem Maud Muller. It's rather obscure, rather long, but it tells the story of a young woman working in the fields who meets a handsome young judge riding on horseback. They only meet for a few minutes, but they are attracted to each other, both from very different social backgrounds, but they go their separate ways. They both enter into unhappy marriages, and both spend their lives thinking of the other and what might have been. And in the final stanza, we get the two lines from the poem that are often quoted. For of all sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest are these, it might have been. Missed opportunities, things we might have done but didn't, a risk, a leap into the unknown that we didn't make and have regretted ever since. The key point for me in the Zacchaeus story is that in spite of his fears, in spite of the risks, in spite of what might be waiting for him, he decided to take the plunge. He took the risk, and in so doing, he opened himself to that life-changing encounter with Jesus. The challenge of the Zacchaeus story is its invitation to you and to me. In our journeys of faith, to face up to our fears, to be emboldened to stand out from the crowd in following Jesus Christ. Always remember the danger of the might-have-beens of human existence, the if-onlys. Instead, be bold, be strong, like Zacchaeus. Dare to take risks in your Christian discipleship, as Zacchaeus did, and embrace those words of St. Paul. Now is the acceptable time. And who knows what encounters, what opportunities, what moments of new insight we will have if we do that along the way. Amen.